an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Sex Education, Season 3, Episode 3. In this episode, one of the neighbors is having sex in a trailer, and their microwave, I believe, is not secured to the wall. And things happen. And that's just like how they start the episode off. And I just really came into this like not ready at all for this level of tragedy. Just not ready at all. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode, except I hate you, and no thank you. Truly, I think this might be like one of the more fucked up things this show has done outside of stuff that has to do with like really particularly serious real life issues that folks face. That is a different thing. But this, I have to think, was based on something. Like, the writers didn't just do this because, I mean, maybe they did. Who am I to say, honestly? But there was something in me for some reason that, like, watched this and was like, this feels super specific. And either it's based on a thing that really happened, or it's based on a thing that very nearly happened. And somebody is just sort of reflecting on what it would be like. And also, you know, you need a death in order for the grief aspect of this story to sort of come into play. But having a person die isn't going to be quite, like, cool enough to just skate past for the one episode's sake of this storyline. And I really don't know how I feel about it. This is like one of those things where I can be just like such a white person. And I say such a white person because there's a thing about like white people being a lot more sympathetic to animals getting killed than people of color. And I'm not saying that because I feel more sympathy for the cat than people of color, but I feel like I can fall into I can deal with like violence against people, but don't you dare inflict violence on an animal in this sort of like way that, when you step back and look at it, really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, like, rationally. And that's not to say that people of color can't also be that way, but, you know. So, the way that this goes, it's like I said, guys, it's like the cold open for the episode. Oh, thank you, Ashleigh. Ashleigh says, Cynthia and Jeffrey, and Kat's name was Jonathan. Thank you. And they are having dinner and just eyeballing the hell out of each other across the dinner table. And he's like, why don't we skip dessert? And they get up and they begin fucking. What I find so fun about this is that they are like in the privacy of their own place and they don't even try getting naked. He is almost fully clothed. She is pretty much fully clothed and he's just like pulled her skirt up. And they are going so hard that the entire trailer is shaking. And there is a microwave up on this shelf. And the cat is just hanging out, watching them fuck as animals do. And they don't notice this microwave inching further and further out. It might be a television, but I think it was a microwave. Correct me if I'm wrong. And it falls onto the cat. It took me a second to realize what it was they were leading to. And the camera pulls back and shows the cat directly under it. I was like, no, they are not. Not only are they, but after it falls onto the cat, they show us the crushed, bloody puddle seeping out from underneath. So here's my feeling on this. One, I really hated it. I really, really, truly did. Like, but on the other hand, This isn't exactly the kind of situation where I would call it gratuitous or unnecessary. Because honestly, as much as like it's supposed to be sort of a funny, like I mean supposed to be in that if you told people about this years later, they would do that like uncomfortable laugh where they're like, I know this is fucked up, but oh my God, kind of thing. I understand that because the situation is so sort of silly, they may have felt as if we're going to have this story kind of veer around and have it be about grief and dealing with grief, we can't just have it fall and have that be implied and not inflict on the viewer the same sort of like awful shock that Cynthia and Jeffrey would have had when they turned around. Like, it would be too easy for the cat's death to be more of a punchline, I think. And if you show this awful scene, while it's really horrific, it just kind of hammers home. It was horrific. Like, it's traumatizing. It's not funny. It's horrifying. And it makes so much sense why the two of them are just kind of like not sure how to cope with it. And what's so difficult is that, and they don't really like go through this in the show, and I'm not really sure it's like needed, but if it were me and this was my cat, I would just feel guilty for the rest of my life. I would feel responsible. That doesn't really come up in this. He asks why she doesn't want to talk about it, and she says it's too painful. And that could just mean anything. I kind of wanted her to, like, you know, express the emotion about, like, that it was our fault, because I would definitely be in that point of view. And that's not to say that I really think it is their fault. It's more that I wanted to see a relatable, like, response come out of her, you know? And like the whole thing, especially considering we have seen how important this cat is to her life. And he mentions how they've tried to have kids and they haven't managed. So this cat is like their sort of son. It's really, really awful, you guys. I hated it. And I am like trying to think if I've ever had like a true calamity befall me in the midst of or immediately after sex. And I've never, like, the closest thing that's ever happened is a bed falling apart underneath us because we were going so hard we literally broke the bed. And that's like, it was just, you know, the calamity about that was that it was my great grandma's bed. And so I ruined an heirloom and it had to be thrown away. So that was that. But otherwise, nothing even remotely close. This sort of reminded me of, if you guys have seen The Sopranos, Christopher, he is a drug addict. I think it's coke that he's using, or no, is it heroin? And spoilers for an episode of a very, very old show at this point. But there comes a point where he is stoned out of his mind and sits on the couch without looking or paying any attention. And he breaks the little dog's neck sitting on the dog and passes out. Does not know he's done it, and his girlfriend comes home, finds him stoned when he had been supposedly trying to be sober, can't find the dog, and then he moves and she sees the body underneath him. And it's just like a similar, like, you could feel like it's funny, but it's such dark humor that it's like almost not anymore, you know? So yeah, this was like a hell of an opening, especially considering Cynthia and Jeffrey have not been like characters very much. You know, Cynthia's been in and out here and there. She sort of like provides the little bits of side business that we need for Maeve's storyline to work in some places. And for them to be like brought into the fold for the main plots and this be what they're brought in on, that's pretty rough. That's hardcore. So yeah, that's how the episode starts. And then we go to the morning getting ready before school situation with pretty much, we go like from one character to another because everybody is sort of dealing with the fact that they have to wear these uniforms. And I had said before in the last episode that like starting off kids wearing uniforms in the middle of a school year just would not happen. And it's fine. I'm totally willing to suspend disbelief for the sake of the story. But I remain, yeah, this wouldn't be real. Also, the fact that at one point the principal, like, throws some, like, I think it throws the, like, skirt uniform at, what is the name of the non-binary character that's hanging out with Jackson all the time now? But they throw the uniform over without being like, oh, and we're going to charge you for this. And that's another thing. Like, you don't get free shit when you have school uniforms. You have to pay for your shit. There's probably like a fund for kids who are in need, but it's the kind of thing where it's so like, you have to be so destitute for qualification that it's just kind of, you know, Cal. Thank you, Ashleigh. Oh my God, she says it's a microwave. It dings. I forgot about the fact that it fucking dings. And there's like all this blood, and Jeffrey's like, maybe it's not that bad, and then it basically like bursts into flames. Like, it's fucked up, you guys. Really is. So what we see is, because clearly we have jumped ahead in time a little bit, Jakob and Ola are moved into the house already with Otis and Jean. I wasn't expecting to just jump to the next episode and have that happening already. And it's not like they're fully moved in. They're still looking for their stuff. They still don't know where things are. And as much as Otis gave his mother permission for this to happen, it's very clear he wasn't ready for the kind of upheaval that it was going to cause. Or, like, he really thought he could cope with it and just didn't think it was going to affect him as much as it is, you know? Because he says later on, he eventually does come around and apologize to Ola. And he says, I am an only child and I'm not used to sharing my space, so you can borrow my stuff. All right, guys, look. It's not like, it isn't a thing this show does all the time. But this show, for me, occasionally has the wrong person apologizing. And for me, Ola doesn't even say anything about she doesn't apologize to Otis for taking his stuff or maybe treating it without thought, carelessly. There is nothing from her about trying harder to respect his boundaries. Correct me if I'm wrong, but she just basically like takes his apology and is grateful and warms to him in that moment. And it's meant to be, we're going to move on from this as characters. But I have an issue, like, and I'm speaking as an only child. So keep in mind, I'm very biased on this, and that may just be like where I'm coming from. And I'm not trying to make too many excuses for that. It's just the kind of thing where they can both apologize. I'm not saying that he wasn't being a hard ass in some ways, but I can't imagine moving into somebody's home and just going into their room and taking things and then acting like they are being the unreasonable one. Like, that is just, to me, it's almost unbelievable to me that Ola would do that, because Ola seems like mature enough to realize, and maybe it's supposed to be a manifestation of Ola having had siblings and the way that things were with her siblings in the past. But because we haven't really like seen that relationship, and Ola has tended to be the most like mature character in a lot of situations, it came as a surprise to me that she would not only do this, but then be like, what is your fucking problem? And I'm like, you took something of his that's like valuable. You know, he's talking about how some of the records he owns are rare, and you're just like kind of tossing them around a room that's in complete disarray anyway, because you're still moving in. I don't really understand what is so hard to understand about his being frustrated and upset by the violation of boundaries. When he says you don't understand boundaries, he is 100% correct. And I just wish that there was a moment when he says, I'll try and like be cooler and get used to sharing space, where she was like, yeah, I'm sorry that I, what I really want is not just, I won't take your stuff. What I really want is her to admit that she is sort of acting out here because she feels a bit of a way about the situation moving in with them altogether. It's very obvious that she's doing this because her father wants it, but she clearly doesn't really love the idea of living with Otis. She doesn't trust Jean and her intentions with her father at all, based on the conversation they have that gets interrupted. And I think the way that she's behaving with Otis is just like that kind of lashing out, but we don't get any of that. And there's no acknowledgement that her behavior is a problem at all. And I don't like it. This is a thing for me in a lot of stuff where you have situations where somebody is painted to be sort of like the bad guy because they have a stick up their ass. And somebody can have a stick up their ass and still be right. That's the thing. And I don't like how often we just decide we're going to side with somebody else in the story because we just like them better, even though they are not actually in the right in this instance. We have grown to like this person's personality more. So we're just going to go with like, I just don't like that. And that's something that I really watch out for in life as well. I have had some situations where friends of mine were reacting to people that I knew they didn't like, for those people doing things that I felt were like somewhat innocuous. And it sort of becomes like a bitch eating crackers scenario. For those who don't know, it's like the whole thing of when you start to dislike somebody, anything they do becomes a problem. So they could be doing something as innocuous as eating crackers, and you're just like stewing, watching them going, look at that bitch over there just eating crackers. And I'm not going to say that never happens with me. But when it is happening, I tend to be aware of it. And I will acknowledge that's what's happening as I bitch about their eating crackers. I'll be like, I just can't stand that bitch. And I'll say that. I will acknowledge it. But not everybody really has the self-awareness to notice when it's happening. And it can be really frustrating if you're on the outside and they want you to like take up arms with them and be like, yeah, see this asshole? And you're like, no. Look, I don't like this guy, but he's not doing anything wrong right now. Like, I'm sorry. I just don't see it, So, look, you guys know that I have been hard on Otis. I don't love Otis, and I still am mad, and I will remain mad that we have never dealt with what he did to Eric, standing Eric up, and then him getting assaulted. It's just never fucking been discussed. I don't know if he even knows what happened still. It's been seasons now. I'm really mad. So I'm not trying to like stick up for Otis in general, and y'all know, but this is an instance where I was just sort of surprised at the fact that we end it and it's just him apologizing. That's all we get. Ashleigh says, agreed, not an only child, eldest of 4, but we all still knew not to take each other's stuff. Yeah. And this is like a kind of thing that I feel has to be sort of cultural in a family. There are families where everybody has their really like strict guidelines. It's either like it's off limits there are specific rules to how you are allowed to go and like borrow stuff from each other, or it's a fucking free for all. And I have had friends who, they had siblings who were around the same size as them, and they just go in and take fucking clothes and don't say anything. And it's like the kind of thing that, as somebody who likes to plan ahead and who takes like clothing pretty seriously, especially at that age, I would be livid if I went to put on a very specific outfit and I found out that some of my shit was gone. And not only just like had they worn it, but it was like dirty and so I couldn't put it on, or worse yet, they're walking around with it in front of my face and acting like I don't know whose that belongs to, But anyway, yeah, this whole situation with them moving in is fraught. And the fact that she pretty much like puts it on the table with Jean and was like, look, what the fuck? Or did you trap my dad? Did you get pregnant on purpose? I really respected it. It was like aggro as fuck, but this is a serious situation. And there are certain things where it's enough of like the stakes are high enough that you can't just like be cute and pussyfoot around what it is you're trying to say, what it is you're low-key accusing somebody of doing. And I kind of respect that Ola was just like, I'm going to just say it. I think you wanted him back and you did a fucked up thing on purpose, and that you don't really care about him because you went and made out with a fucking ex. And if you actually cared about him the way you keep claiming, why would you have done that? And they get interrupted, and that conversation isn't resolved or returned to in this episode. So we just sort of leave Jean aware of Ola's feelings, and there isn't any response that she has given in an attempt to either soothe Ola's fears or explain herself. And I'm kind of wondering if we're going to get that in the next episode, or it might be a little while, might be longer than that. They obviously have to have another conversation. So, okay, we've got them. There's a whole thing going on that I really hated to watch with Lily and Ola. And this got to me, guys. This one really got to me. And I think it's because it's a depiction of a relationship that is really one-sided, that isn't violent. It's not like, ew, you guys clearly hate each other, just break up. It's not anything so overt that if you talk to a friend about what was going on, they would necessarily be like, well, fucking dump them. But in my opinion, that does need to happen. I don't know if it's just that Lily's being distracted by this thing that's going on is an impermanent situation that will eventually sort of like lose its allure and she will return to Earth, so to speak. But Ola tries more than once to talk to Lily about real shit that is going on in her life. She's talking to Lily about the fact that Jean is unpacking her dead mother's stuff. Or wait, is she dead? She is dead, right? She died. Or did she leave? I don't remember. You can remind me, Ashleigh. But either way, when you have somebody who's like not taking the place of a parent, but like kind of taking the place of, like, let's be real. And they're going through shit from your actual biological parent. It's a trip, you know. I think a lot of us have been in that position. And it's because a lot of us have seen parents who got divorced and remarried and stuff like that. It's weird, man. There's like, you know, a variety of responses people can have based on the relationship that they had with that parent, that they have with the step parent now. And I know that it was really uncomfortable for me when my father's wife, Evelyn, was going through stuff that was my mother's, because my dad had told Evelyn a very specific version of what had happened between them that was not fair. And so Evelyn had a real idea of who my mom was. Plus, Evelyn was a born-again Christian and my mother was a pagan. So there was a whole sort of like vibe and attitude about anything that had belonged to my mother that was really like kind of not cool with me. But I didn't know how to articulate that. And to a degree, I felt like it just wasn't my business either. And, you know, my mother and Evelyn like met one time at my wedding when I married Brendan. It was like just not really an issue. So I figured if they're not interacting and having butting heads, who cares? But it feels like you're stepping into some shit that you don't know about or understand and taking ownership of it. And you don't have the right to do that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that perception. It's not that they do have the right and you are taking it away from them. I feel like people have to earn that right. You know, I mean, I just personally, I really felt for Ola in that moment. And the fact that it's what sort of triggered the conversation made a lot of sense to me. Everybody's telling me that she did die. Okay, cool. So yeah, even more baggage there then. And in the midst of all of this, she's got a client visiting. And this was one of those things that I find so weird. And this is in so many shows, and I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it with this show as well. What is the deal with TV shows set in like high schools and stuff where people don't start class until like 10 a.m. apparently. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Like, these guys are, it's like, it looks like the middle of the morning based on the light outside. Everybody is like up and awake and has all this time, you know, they're getting ready and they're like rushed, but it doesn't feel like they're rushed really. It feels like they're rushed in the sense that they just want to get the fuck out of here because everybody's annoying them. And Jean is having a meet with Amy, I guess, before class begins, if I'm not like misunderstanding that whole setup. It was a weird, like, this, and I'm not just accusing this show of it. Virtually every show set in high school I have ever seen, they act like people have the whole morning to themselves. People will, like, go and meet and have breakfast places. I don't know about you guys, but my school opened at 7 and class started at 7:30. And there was no place in town that was like open to go before then. Nowadays we've got like Starbucks that opens at like 5 a.m. But otherwise there was nothing. And I would watch these like things where people would go to each other's houses before class, or they would like meet and do shit in secret before class. And I was like, how? Get out of here, you know? Rowan says, I do think British schools start later than American schools, like 9 or something. And Ashleigh says, wait, is 9 not a normal time for schools to start? When do Americans go to school? And then apparently Ashleigh heard me say what time we start and just responded with, what? Yeah. So Ashleigh, here's the thing. We have this weird thing in the US. It's a combo 1-2 punch of the deal with school schedules. One, we want the school day to be longer because we think a longer school day means our kids are getting more education, even though everything has empirically proven that is wrong and not helpful in any way. It has been proven so many times, in fact, that students do better with a later start time. It's just ridiculous that we still fucking cleave to this idea. Secondly, there is a lot of like concern about parents who have to be to work in the morning being able to be home and see their kids get to school, whether it's for the safety of the children or just because they're worried their kid's going to cut class. Like, they want a lot of the organization of the schedule is around parents like work, which is ironic because the earlier that you start the school day, the earlier kids get out, which means mostly kids get out of school long before their parents are done with work. You know, so it just like, again, there is very little logic applied. And it's just, yeah. Rowan says, yeah, for some of the year, I definitely used to go to school in the dark. 100%. Like in Connecticut, the majority of the school year was in the dark. Like straight up getting up at 6:30 to, if I was like on my shit, getting up at 6:30. If I had to like straighten my hair or something. But otherwise, I was rolling out of bed at like 7:05 and then brushing my teeth and doing my makeup in the car on the way because my dad had to drive me because we were just close enough that no buses went past my house. But we were like over a mile walk. And it was just kind of like, yeah, I'm not doing that. So my dad, he had to be at work and he would just drive me on his way to work. So Rowan says, really, they want schools to be babysitters so parents can be out participating in capitalism. Yeah. And that's like the thing is that we keep saying, oh, well, we want longer days because we want our kids to have better educations. And it's like, no, we want longer days because we want childcare for free. Ashleigh says, obviously not British, but school started for me at 9. We'd finish at 4, and then there would be after school study options. Study would be 4:30 to 6:30, and night study would be 7 to 9. Yeah, and like that feels a lot more reasonable to me. Getting out at 2 o'clock or 2:30, depending, I'd never really understood it. And it was so weird because like you go in at 7:30 and then we would have lunch at 10:30 in the morning. That was our lunch hour because we had already been there for 3 hours. So that was like sort of halfway through our day, but that's not lunchtime. That's crazy, you know? So yeah, it was just a weird thing. But it's just, most of the things that I'm referring to are shows that are set in the United States specifically. The one that's like one of the biggest offenders was Pretty Little Liars, where it was just like, yeah. But anyway, so we have there's the whole thing I kind of like glossed over because I was focusing on Ola's situation with her trying to talk to Lily. But what Lily is distracted by is the fact that she saw that crop circle and then went to show Ola the next day and it wasn't there anymore. And we saw it. You know, we saw exactly what she's talking about. And that is like, you can fake crop circles, but you can't undo it, as far as I know. So I don't know what's going on here. I truly feel like she's got to be being set up for some reason, but I don't know why anybody would. And I don't know how they could, truly. It's like, and she's in these like chat rooms and stuff talking about the whole thing with like this alien thing that she thinks is going to happen. And we're getting into an area here where I'm starting to be a little bit concerned because you get a little bit too woo-woo with some of this shit and I'm just not interested anymore. But yeah, Ola feeling like neglected. Lily just talks over her without hearing her at all. And I don't know if you guys have been in a relationship where it felt like you weren't being heard, but there is like low key nothing more devastating. Like, you know, outside of really obvious actual abuse, when you know your partner's like a good person and that they do care in their way, but you talk and they just don't hear you, like really truly do not tune in, or they start off hearing you and you watch their eyes glaze over as you see the moment when they tune out. I will tell you what, kids, nothing makes me feel more neglected and also just like deeply sad than feeling like the person I'm supposed to be the most connected with isn't making any effort. It's awful. And I have been in that situation a number of times. And it's because I tend to date dudes who have ADD, like every partner I've ever had, because I think I also do. So I'm drawn to people who understand this like mentality I've got. And also guys who are workaholics. And so focusing and attending isn't like a top trait of theirs, you know? It's rough. And that's just with people that I know really care and have trouble mentally with focusing and with following. Lily, it just feels like she truly doesn't even see Ola anymore. She's at her computer and she's got Ola sitting on the bed behind her and like barely looks at her. They're very separate in that moment. And then she just tells Ola, I have this story. I'm going to send it to you for you to read. And it's like she wants, like asking somebody to read your story is you being very vulnerable with them. And also you're demanding a lot of their time. Reading a story and wanting their feedback on it, that's like a pretty big ask. And she wants this from somebody who she is not even like acknowledging what they're going through at all. So I'm kind of, you know, I feel like this could be resolved if they had a couple conversations about it. But if I were hearing about this from a friend that they were being treated this way, my instinct would be immediately to be like, yeah, you need to get the fuck out of that. That sounds bad. Because what you start to get into then is I'm going to have a conversation with them about how they're treating me. But then, and this is how it is for me, so I'm just speaking for me, I start to be really paranoid that every time they talk to me or pay attention to me, that this is their chore, that this is the thing they're doing because they know if they don't, I'll be mad, but they're not genuinely interested. They're not actually engaged because they give a shit about me or what I'm saying. They're doing this because they're trying to keep the peace. And that's a really different vibe and it sucks. And like, whether or not they reassure me that's not what's going on, it's how it's going to feel. And that's the problem with like, well, just tell them, express to them what you want. I totally agree that that's the way to be in a relationship, but doing that puts a kind of baggage on the results after that is very, very hard to get past. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see what's going on with them. We have a whole thing with a double date between Eric and Adam and Otis and Ruby, which is fascinating. And oh my God, so Eric says to Adam, I need you to put in some effort. And then follows it up with, I need you to open up a little and make conversation and ask questions. And I really liked that. When he first said, I need you to make an effort, I was like, what exactly does that? But then he gets very specific and I was like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. And Adam, to his credit, genuinely does try. I really appreciate, he asks, does anybody else like the smell of their own farts as his opener, which is an awesome, hilarious, yes. Appropriate for this crowd, maybe after a few drinks, but not now, no. Not good. Truly awful. There's also the thing where Ruby is looking for something that's gluten-free, and he asks how long she's been diabetic. And honestly, it was just a misunderstanding on his part. A lot of people don't know what gluten is. It's wild. You hear people talking about gluten-free stuff, and then they continue on, and it's clear they don't even know what it is. So I don't blame anybody who doesn't realize, but he was trying. He thought she was diabetic and was trying to engage on that. I respect that. But yeah, the whole thing is so awkward initially. And then they get past this point where he admits that he watches the Kardashians with his mom, which connects him and Ruby. And they wind up chatting about that. And it sort of breaks the ice between the two of them. And it's really cute. And eventually Otis says, I can see what the appeal is with Adam, and you see when he gets the text from Eric, I'm excited for our double date. He looks not thrilled about it. He really doesn't want to, is the sense you get. But he comes around and he's trying for the sake of his friend. And I really appreciate that. There's still a lot of weirdness about the whole Adam Eric thing, to be honest, because of the combination of bullying and the devaluing going on. And we have sort of that resurface later because Eric goes home with Adam. They walk in on Adam's mom practically dry humping this guy. And Adam, he introduces Eric as his friend. And Eric doesn't make a scene. He just says, oh, I was just leaving. And Adam knows perfectly well why. But he texts Eric later and says, I wasn't ready. And Eric says, I understand. And I think that's fair. You can understand where they're coming from and be respectful of it, but also be I really don't want to be here now. This feels weird. I feel like that's fair. And also, I have a feeling that once Adam finally just says, my boyfriend, he is going to get from his mother, Dodoy, you think I don't know that? I'm aware. Come on. We'll see. Maybe not. But I think his mother has to know what's the fucking situation with these two. Come on. There's a vibe. I felt the vibe before it was anything, They really did good casting people who have actual chemistry. So that's the thing with those two. And then we've got Ruby, who has been avoiding inviting Owen, do you hear me? Otis over to the house. And I was glad that we finally have this sort of come to a head here, but the way it ends is awful. She invites Otis over, and you can tell how incredibly worried she is. She is so self-conscious about the image that she projects at school versus the way she actually lives. She is obviously really close to her dad and loves him so much, and her concern and care for him is given without any resentment. It doesn't feel like there's, I wish I didn't do this. I'm, just I am obligated to care for this person who is my parent, but it's draining the life out of me. And that is a very real thing. And I wouldn't be mad if that's what they decided to do with it. But instead, they have her dad be kind of this adorable, affable goofball who loves his daughter and is bragging about her and talking to Otis about how she talks about him all the time. And Otis jumps in and helps arrange her dad back on the bed and pick him up and move him. And all of this stuff helping out with him without there seeming to be any awkwardness from him or feelings of like, ew, really? About any of it. And I think that risk that she took in showing Otis how she lives and him accepting it and fitting in so beautifully and it not seeming strange for him at all is what makes her say, I love you later in the episode. And I gotta say, I don't feel like I fully appreciated this actress playing Ruby until that moment. When she is at home, her energy is totally different than the energy she gives off when they're out or when they're at school. When she calls him and is talking to him, the vibe is, it's like she's a different person. She's just so much more warm and vulnerable and open. There's a closed off thing that happens to her face when she is being self-protective. And I don't feel like I fully appreciated what she was doing with this character until I got to see her not being that way. And that's what makes her not getting an I love you back extra devastating, because since we have seen how like hard her outer shell is normally, we know what it probably cost her to say that. And I like, it was awful because I wanted Otis to say it back just because I wanted her to not be hurt. Cause like, this means something. This is a very real moment, but also it's clear Otis does not love her. And I'm not even sure she loves Otis. I'm not really even like, I just think that she has not let anyone in before. And so she is kind of the first time she's done that and there's been any success with it, she has gone in the direction of thinking that's what's going on. And I don't think I agree, but I can understand why she would be fooled into thinking it's love. That's a real thing that I've gone through personally. Like, there's a lot of layers to letting people see who you are. And there are times where there's like just a particular part of you that you've never let anybody see. And you don't even purposely guard it in a way that's conscious. It's just like, no, I've just never told anyone. Why would I, you know? And then you meet somebody that really gets that. And it feels really special. And it might actually be special. But I just felt so heartbroken for her, man. Because how do they see each other the next day after that moment? This is a thing that I always wonder about. When couples have one person who says I love you and the other doesn't, and they are either not in person or they're like parting when they say it and this moment happens, what happens when you see each other again? This is a whole thing in like Sex and the City where Carrie says it to Big and he doesn't say it back. And they ask what she's going to do. And she says, I figure now the relationship has the shelf life of a dairy product. It's going to curdle in about a week. So he's got about a week to say it. And then I'm going to have to dump him. Like, and it's an interesting way to go because you're sort of putting a time limit on somebody like making a pretty massive statement about you, which isn't entirely fair. But if you feel strongly and they don't seem to, I can't fault you for not wanting to keep wasting your time. You know, like it's I don't really feel like there's a right way to deal with the situation. But Ruby opened up to Otis in a way we have never seen her do, just with her inviting him over. Then this is the whole shebang. And I feel like we're never going to see that again now. I just don't see that happening again, you know? It's awful, guys. I really hated that so much. Ugh. I never thought I would feel so sorry for Ruby, but truly. I kind of skipped over the whole thing with Amy because she's meeting with Jean for her talk about what happened with the sexual assault. And she doesn't tell Jean what actually, she tries and she just gets so like emotional about it. And Jean kind of agrees to like let her back off and they would just talk about in general how she's been feeling. But the thing that she is really fascinated by is the differences in the looks of vulvas. And this is like a really important topic. I don't think because I didn't grow up with porn, I already had like an unrealistic body standard set for me as a 90s kid. But if you grew up with constant access to porn and all of your classmates have constant access to porn and you like only see the porn star type body, even amateur porn, there's a really consistent body type a lot of the time, unless you specifically seek out something different. I can't imagine the number that would do on my like sense of self. And that's like regarding just overall body type, never mind the specificity of genitalia, because that has to be a thing with men too. You see like one type of dick, and that's the dick you see. And like, what do all the poor dudes out there who like, how do they feel about if they just don't look like this at all? It's just so maddening to me, the damage that we do with this stuff, you know? And so, yeah, Amy is like thinking that she has a weird vulva, but it turns out that like it's totally normal. And she's looking through all of these different photos from a website. I think it's all vulvas are beautiful, and there's like a hyphen between each word .com, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know if that's real, but it was like a nice little aside. I really enjoy Amy as a character because she is so open about things that a lot of people would consider like TMI, and so willing to talk about stuff without having a hang up. And it's interesting that she is that like open verbally, but in terms of physically, she has become closed off due to the assault, but that hasn't seemed to hinder her being able to talk about these sorts of things without any visible embarrassment at all. I just love Amy. She's such a fun character. But yeah, we don't get a resolution there. We just have her beginning to talk to Jean and agreeing that they're going to like continue these sessions. And I really have my fingers crossed for her. So then we have Maeve. It's so weird, guys. So first of all, we've got Maeve, Lily. Does Ola get brought in? I don't think so. I think it's Maeve, Lily, and Cal only that get brought in to see Hope, the headmistress. Vivi brings them in. Guys, Vivi is on my shit list this season. Holy. I mean, it's not like it's completely unrecoverable, but she has truly turned a corner here that Jackson deciding to pull back is like not only more than fair. I would have lost my shit completely. Ashleigh says, no, Lily is there too. Oh, I thought that's what I said. Sorry. I think I was saying was Ola there. Ola's not there though, right? It's Lily, Maeve, and Cal, but no Ola, right? Oh no, Ola is there because she's got the LGBTQ pin and she's being told to take it off. And in this like gross moment where the headmistress says like, I hope that your values aren't so fragile that a pin is the only way you represent them. Something like that. Y'all, that would have caused a fight. Like there is something about not only how cavalier she's being in general about a kid at that age expressing themselves and putting themselves out there in a way that could be risky for them, but also implying something really like trifling about it. That got to me really, really bad. She says something to Maeve about there's no Cookie Monster. And I will be honest, I don't think I noticed that Maeve's hair was blue. Apparently it's blue. I feel like I never realized that. I don't know. I think I just thought it was dark. Like she had dyed it like black, you know, but evidently it's blue. That's an issue. We've got Cal, who is wearing the quote boys uniform. Now, Hope caves to the fact that Cal's uniform can be the boys uniform because I'm feminist and you don't have to wear a skirt. But you have to wear something that fits. And fits is a really relative term. That's extremely subjective. And we find out later, like, you can have all kinds of feelings about the way you wear your clothes. God knows that all of us We choose fits that feel particularly safe to us for reasons that, like, we don't need to disclose to anybody. And Cal, it feels to me, it's a combination of things. There's probably, like, the body dysmorphia issue, which I'm sort of, like, putting on Cal because of the discomfort in the locker room. And I know that a lot of that was because of the way that the other girls were talking about them. But I feel like there is a desire to, like, sort of hide their body shape because they are non-binary and they do not want to accentuate the body shape that they feel will cause them to be perceived as more feminine, if that makes sense. Which makes a lot of sense to me. Like, if you are wanting to really underline the fact that you do not feel like you belong specifically to either gender, sort of giving yourself, like, a more neutral overall body shape helps with that, you know? And I, like, that makes a lot of sense. Also, not stated, but possible, if you are somebody who has sensory issues, like somebody with autism, having clothing that is too close fitting can be a real fucking problem. Like, it can feel unsafe, you know? And that is something that's just straight up not being addressed at all. So yeah, I don't know. I just, this whole issue with wanting everybody to be the same is just so, like, deeply revealing in a way that Hope doesn't seem to appreciate at all. It's truly just, like, the fact that Hope is just reading books and then implementing shit. Hope, you may want to fucking, like, reach out and find some other sources to see if anybody backs up the findings of this one book you're reading, because there are different viewpoints on things, and basing your entire structure of your school around the assertions of one author. Maybe there's more than one author to this book, but even so, it is not a good idea, and it wouldn't be approved of by, like, professors. If you were writing a paper, they would encourage you to find other sources. So as an educator, maybe you should, like, do the thing that you would demand of your own students. But so let's see. Ashleigh said, oh no, sorry. Rowan says, even binary kids this age can feel a lot of discomfort with body changes or lack thereof. My sister wore a lot of layers and baggy clothing in middle and high school. That's a really good point, Rowan, because, like, especially if a person with a more feminine body develops quickly, the attention that they can get from that is so, I mean, anybody who has lived in a female presenting body knows what we are subjected to anyway. Just anyway. When you are that age and it begins, it is its own thing. It's a really specific experience. And there were some girls at my school that I specifically remember people, like, saying that she got boobs early because she was a slut. That, like, having sex made her boobs appear, which is so nothing. There is, like, that is just nothing. And people fucking bought and were, like, repeating this. And I remember being like, that's not how that works at all. What are you talking about? The thing about the thigh gap as well, a thigh gap was an indicator that you had had so much sex that it, like, shoved your legs apart, like your bone structure changed. No, dicks don't do that to bodies. They don't have that power. I know you want to think that your dick is that kind of power. It does not have that kind of power. Oh, don't even get me started. So yeah, it's just, there is a slew of reasons why people choose to dress in the ways that they do, and assigning everybody the same thing. There is just such a myriad of ways that you can make people feel like shit because you're doing that. Personally, for example, and I've said this before, I have worked places that required a uniform. And as somebody who was at the time, I was a size 16, 18, they did not have anything that would fit me. So I had to wear something different from everyone else just because they didn't go up to my size, which was like an XXL, XL. And there's like, way to other me, you know, when you already feel like you don't fit in society because of the size you are, to then literally look different from everyone else because you don't fit, literally. It's a real fucking like shit feeling. It sucks. I was kind of looking for that this episode to see if there was anybody who straight up didn't fit into the uniform. But the only character that we have had who's like significantly overweight is Vivi, and she has seemed to lose a ton of weight since the last season. So we kind of lost that aspect, and I guess we're not going to address that, but it's a real thing, you know? I mean, yeah. So they have this meet, and Lily's makeup is also addressed. Her hair and makeup is not appropriate. It's distracting, whatever. And then they're all allowed to leave, and the headmistress keeps Maeve behind and tells her, I understand like you don't have as many resources, but everybody should get an opportunity. So I'm going to do some things to look into some funding for you to be able to apply for the Talented and Gifted program studying in the US. And it's one of those things where I'm sure that it will look very good for her resume, but also like, Maeve, don't come to the US. You don't like it here. I promise you will not like it. But this is like a moment of hope seeming to like get it on some level, and Maeve clearly being grateful for a moment until Hope has to bring it back down to earth and be like, and then fix your hair. So Maeve's story in this episode is interesting. Her mom comes by to pick up the keys, or no. Yeah, well, she doesn't come to pick up the keys, but she needs keys because her passport is in the house, and she evidently needs that to get custody of her daughter back. And she is waiting around, doesn't want to see Maeve, and Isaac winds up inviting her inside because he paints. And he like entices her to stay, saying that he'll paint her. Clearly because he is aware that Maeve really wants a moment to connect where her mother can't easily get away. And he's trying to create that moment for her. And there's a really like immature, Isaac, will you tell Maeve that I'm here for such and such when she's standing right there? I love that Isaac doesn't really he just looks at Maeve and goes, did you get that? But eventually, I really liked this. Maeve sticks up for herself a little and is like, Mom, look, I get that you love us and I understand why you're upset, but you have an illness that you have not fully dealt with. And you fucked me and my brother up pretty good. And I don't want to see that happen to my little sister. So yeah, I'm sorry that it went this way, but you have to admit the situation that you're in. And I was just so glad, you know, because like you can feel sorry that somebody got put in the position of facing things in such a brutal way, while also being like, maybe you needed this, you know? And I just am totally on Maeve's team with that. So they kind of make up a little bit. Her mom is like sort of texting her a bit later and stuff. But then Isaac and her also make up. It's an interesting moment. I don't know how I feel about it, because Isaac with this lie from the get-go really kind of got on my bad side. And as much as I appreciate him coming clean eventually, and I appreciate him organizing things so that she had to see her mom, the whole, you think I don't know you, but I do. I know that you bite your nails when you're nervous or shy. I know that you still cut the crust off your sandwiches. This is the kind of like trite shit that I find really boring. And this is like the kind of stuff that romance novels are often built around. So that's part of why those don't tend to appeal to me. But just because you know how I take my coffee doesn't mean you know me, guy. Like, you know, and I get what he's trying to do, but it just feels really false in the moment. It just didn't work for me. So I don't blame her for like taking his apology, because he says essentially like, I really wish I could take it back. I shouldn't have done it. He flat out takes full responsibility. So that I appreciate. And her saying, all right, fine. But if you ever lie to me again, I'll cut your balls off. 100% on it. I like it. But that little like monologue about how much he knows her, I was just kind of like, ugh, jerk off motion, whatever, dude, you know? It's fine. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that I forgot. We didn't see Adam's dad at all this episode, so don't know what's going on with him. I guess because we had Jeffrey and what's her name? And their whole deal with the cat sort of taking up that space, Cynthia. But yeah, this is that sort of still going on in the background, and I guess we'll catch up with him. I'm very curious what he's up to. And oh, you know what? Ashleigh said something about how Eric was reading Raheem's book when he texted Adam back. And Adam asks Eric why he never gave Raheem stuff back, or why he still has it, because he kept the poems Raheem wrote for him and the books that Raheem lent him. And this is the kind of thing Raheem says, I burned everything of yours in a well-controlled fire when we broke up, which is so funny to me. There's something about Raheem that I find likable, even though I do think that him and Eric are a total mismatch. What's so awful about like being queer in a small pond is that it feels like you've only got so many options. You know, with Eric in this situation, he's got Adam, Raheem, and what's his face, Ruby's friend. And those are the only other gay men in school. Can't remember. I can never remember his name. I don't know why I have such trouble with his name in particular. And like, obviously Ruby's friend is completely off the table, out of the question. So it's just Raheem and Adam, who couldn't be on like further ends of the spectrum. And yeah, I want more for Eric. You know, there's this great scene too where he is getting ready and he's got Todrick Hall's Hair, Nails, Hips, Heels playing, and that song was like my workout anthem for a minute there, and watching him sort of perform it while he's getting ready was so much fun. Especially because like Todrick has a really similar energy overall and look to Eric, so I was just like, this is like completely appropriate. I love it. But I don't want Eric and Raheem rekindling anything as much as I like Raheem. What I want, I think, actually, is for Raheem and Adam to get more friendly and each help the other open up in different areas. Because Raheem feels like weirdly closed off in certain senses. And Adam is as well. And I feel like they could complement each other as friends, not as a couple, and make each other better people, you know? But yeah, so, oh, right. Ashleigh says there wasn't a whole lot to it, but we also had Jackson dealing with his anxiety and smoking with Cal. There was a lot of weed stuff this episode. I actually, thank you, Ashleigh, for reminding me about that, because I wanted to touch on it. We've got Ruby's dad who is smoking because it's, you know, to deal with the pain of his accident and his injuries. And it's not legal. And also Cal smoking for their anxiety. And it's something that Jackson gives a shot because he's always been, you know, having to take drug tests for swimming before. But Jackson is just like, all right, you know what? Fine. Fuck it. I'm going to do it. And says at one point that he hasn't felt this relaxed in a long time. And I think I don't know if I've told the story on this, but just really quick recap. Friend of the show and co-host Bitches, aka Chris, she invited me to California for like allegedly for a panel. I was on a panel, but it was kind of a trick to get me to take a vacation without planning on it. And I had never used weed but like one hit at a party one time. That was all I got. And she gave me some edibles. And as somebody with really high anxiety who was also pushing myself to the brink with workload, I was having an impossible time relaxing. I couldn't understand why I couldn't seem to slow down. My mind wouldn't slow down. And then she gives me this edible and I go down to the pool, and it like kicked in while I was like floating in this empty hotel pool. Gorgeous pool in LA, but there was not a soul in it but me. It was like one of those perfect days. Truly, you could not ask for better conditions. And I had this sudden moment of perfect well-being that I hadn't had since I was like 17. Just one of those, like, everything is going to be okay kind of moments that you sort of lose as you get older, you know? And I have been a pothead ever since. I just cannot tell you guys how much it has done for me with dealing with my anxiety and my like overall compulsion to always be working, always be productive. It helps to it helps to get my brain off that track because I can't seem to do it myself. And maybe there will come a day where I find the way I can do it without a drug. But as of right now, I need it and I don't feel bad about it. Like, it's really frustrating that it's not legal here. I have to find means, you know, but I'm set up pretty well now for having it for a while. And I am grateful all the time that I found a way to get access because it has been a true game changer. And I just always kind of thought it wasn't for me. You know, I had tried that one hit at the party, didn't really seem to feel anything. When I watched other people get really stoned, they seemed so stupid that I was just like, how is this fun? And it's like, there's a happy medium. You don't need to just, you know, completely zonk yourself out. But as somebody who has an issue with a hyperactive brain, it's truly been a godsend. And I really encourage anybody who is able to safely access it in a regulated way to do that. The edibles that I'm eating are like pre-packaged, so I know exactly how much I'm getting, which helps a lot with like figuring out what works for me. And I truly am so grateful to bitches for getting me to try it because I wasn't like, I wouldn't have, you know, and I would still be sitting here today like a goddamn uptight mess. I'm still uptight, don't get me wrong, but it's certainly better. So yeah, this whole thing with also Jackson like finding out that Cal has anxiety as well. And Jackson gives him a look like, oh, like, because he's never really been able to freely talk before. And Jackson, he keeps saying, like, I feel like I know you. And I'm really curious if there's anything to this because do they know each other? Like, is there some secret relationship that they both aren't aware of? Or maybe only he is? Like, what is that about? But I am loving the connection between the two of them. And I'm also sort of loving that this doesn't feel romantic. And I love that he had the friendship with Vivi that also didn't feel romantic. I just like that Jackson is being allowed to just have female friendships and it's not turning into, oh, she has a crush and he doesn't feel that way. Or he has a crush and she doesn't feel that. Or, oh my God, maybe are they going to get to, like, it's nothing. Maybe it'll turn that corner and I'll be like, ugh. But right now I love this. So, all right, so I have to wrap up. I'm over time. But thank you guys again very much for joining me. Thank you to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode. And until next time, y'all, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.